Hello everybody, my name is Dev Prasad Singh, or you call me Tav for short. I am in 10th grade in Auburn, Mountain View High School. This last summer I went to Tamba, Japan, because of the Cat Sister Cities organization. And while there I was able to eat many delicious foods, because my host mother was a very good cook. So to start off, the health differences between American food and Japanese food. American food is more unhealthy because we put steroids, we genetically alter them. We also treat the animals harshly as well. Because of that, and fast food restaurants, America is number one in obesity rates. We are more susceptible to heart attacks. We have more diabetes rates than ever compared to Japanese food, which is high in protein, all organic, high in nutrients, and overall just the most healthiest thing you can eat. But the other differences are the aesthetics of Japanese food and the American foods. So Japanese food is more artistic because Japanese people, they believe that whatever tastes good should also look good. So we have on the very left is these types of, I think they were cakes or some sort of crepes. Japanese people always put contrast into their food, such as red and green. They make it more artsy. And sometimes they make it into like some sort of sculpture. And the middle picture shows when I first saw it, I thought, hey, why are there two pieces of logs displayed? But it turns out those are a type of cakes that people eat, which I was surprised because usually when we have cakes here, they look all nice. It's all puckered up with pretty colors, maybe some sprinkles. But Japanese people, they just go all out in designs. On the very right of the slide, we have mochi. Mochi it's a sweet with bean paste and sometimes a strawberry or some sort of fruit in the middle. So I was part of a tea ceremony with my host family, and while there, I was able to see that when they were giving out sweets as per tradition, one of them had like fish, like it's all art. So they had like artificial fishes in them, like all because of food color or something. It was amazing to look at that. And they had flower designs. They had just all in all amazing designs on them. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are also different in Japanese culture. Japanese people believe, well, they don't believe, but they have small portions with a large amount of food, so you don't overstuff yourself. But in America, when you go to a restaurant, you order, for example, noodles. Your plate's piled high up, and sometimes you can't even finish it. So you have to box it home, bring it home, heat it up later on, and eat it. But in Japan, they make sure to have the right amount. So if you want more, you can order more. So you'll be all safe. So in Japan, their breakfasts are they have similar foods throughout the day. So in the beginning, in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they always have rice. They always have barley tea, and they always have protein with them at all times. So breakfast, when I was there, we ate multiple of fruits, vegetables. We had, I believe, was fish in the morning sometimes, or a steak. But it was in small portions again. They don't eat a lot, but they have enough in order to just fill themselves up. So we had barley tea, which is, in my opinion, I didn't like it very much, but since it's an acquired taste. One time in breakfast, we had natto, which is these sticky beans. They weren't really great. Just say my gag reflex just went sky high after that. But usually the breakfasts are really good. They eat, they talk with the family. Just all in all, just a healthy breakfast to get the day started. American breakfast, in my opinion, we don't do that much because when I wake up in the morning, I get ready for school. I usually just grab a bowl of cereal, a toast, and that's about it. I just do that and then I go to school. But we really don't have time now these days just to prepare food, prepare like omelet, some rice, maybe some like bacon in the morning. We don't have time for that. We just go straight to work and that's it. It's the complete opposite in Japan because you're able to relax, you're able to talk with family first, and then you're able to go on with your day. Lunch is the other thing because usually Japanese people, when they go to work, they bring a lunchbox called ibento. And usually in bentos, they have, like I used to say, you go all artsy. So I believe on the very right of the slides, there is a lunchbox with a cat bus and mini beings in there. That's from the movie Totoro. So they go all out for lunch. So they have put, like in aesthetics again, they put high contrast in colors, whatnot. But it's usually the same as breakfast because there's small portions and whatnot. Maybe you can have chicken there, maybe some fish. It's all in all, it's somewhat similar to breakfast because they have the same diet throughout the day. So in dinner, usually in Japan, it's more high in protein, usually because it's the end of the day, you're tired, you want to have a healthy meal and good food just before you go to sleep. So when I was there in Japan, my host family, we ate out in dinner a lot, but when we were at home for dinner, the food was amazing, especially when we went out too. So the first dinner that I had experienced when I was over there was with the family. We had this type of hamburger. It wasn't the hamburger that we traditionally eat in America with buns, tomatoes, lettuce, and cheese. It was more of a steak with melted cheese inside with garnishing and caramelized onions, salad, vegetables, and fruits. There were also many other things like cartilage. They eat cartilage there, which is very crunchy, but it was okay. Again, rice, barley tea, and a bunch of other things. But like in America, we really don't have, well, we do have that, but it's more like you gotta be in a rush. In my family, we usually eat really late at night because that's when everybody comes home. In my family, we traditionally eat with everybody in the house, but we usually just make food, and if there's leftovers, we usually eat that after dinner. We really don't just make something new every single day. But in Japan, they make everything new every single time it's dinner time.
Hi guys, I'm Kaylee Dickinson. I'm from Auburn Riverside High School. I went to Japan this past summer through the Kent and Auburn Tamba-SHI, and I've done my project on food and vegetarianism and how they compare between the US and Japan. I'm vegetarian, and so I also love food, and so I was really interested in these topics, and that's why I chose them to do a project on. To start off, I'm just going to go through the meals that I typically eat in my daily life, and the meals, how those compared to what I had while I was in Japan. To start off, breakfast, or asagohan. In the US, I typically have, let's say, like oatmeal, or maybe a smoothie, or like pancakes, something along those lines. And while I was in Japan, I found some things that I ate would be considered like not typical here. And like one of those things was miso soup with rice was like common breakfast to have. And that's just one thing that you wouldn't typically expect to have for breakfast maybe here. So moving on to lunch, or ohiru gohan. So here in the US, I might have a soup or a salad, just something along those lines. For lunch in Japan, sometimes I had, a lot of the time I had soba noodles, which are buckwheat noodles that you add, that you dip into a sauce that you add wasabi and green onions to, and that was just a easy go-to meal for me since it was obviously vegetarian. And a few other things I had for lunch were udon and maybe ramen, so a lot of noodle-based dishes. So next up is bangohan, or dinner. And while I was there, I found that dinners typically have dinners and all of the other meals have multi-dishes. So it's not like one plate. You have like maybe a bowl of rice with like the soup in the middle, or like some side dishes to go along with it. One thing I made with my family while I was there was croquet, which are it's like you take mashed potatoes and then you maybe add like some vegetables inside of it, and then you put that in like an egg wash, and then you put a breadcrumb coat around it, and then you put that into a fryer. And we had that with rice, or gohan, with a little salad on the side. Moving on to dessert, or okashi. So in the US, as you might see on the slide, there's a lot of like ice creams, and one thing we took my host student for was fried ice cream, which is very interesting to see her reaction to that. So in Japan, while I was there, I found that the desserts they have are a lot more subtly sweet compared to our desserts, which are like very outright sweetness. And one thing we had was ichigo daifuku, which is kind of a mochi, which is like a pounded rice, sweet rice. And then on the inside is anko, or red bean, a sweet red bean paste. And then inside of that is a strawberry. And I think we all really missed that because it was very delicious. Here are like the main differences I found between the US and Japan when it comes to food and vegetarianism as a whole. When eating out versus eating in, I find that in the US, typically when I go out to a restaurant, a lot of the time they have, on the menu, they'd have something on the side that says specifically like vegetarian or some kind of symbol to indicate that it's a vegetarian or vegan meal. While I was in Japan, I found that you'd usually there wouldn't be something like that. You'd have to like look at the menu and the description of the item to figure out whether it would be considered vegetarian or not. And then while eating in with my host family, I typically found that they could adjust the meal, however, to make it to fit, so it wouldn't have meat or wouldn't have fish within it. As for the types of cuisine available, I find that in the U.S., when you go out to eat somewhere, a lot of the time, like when you're going to some place, you might have like a Mexican restaurant right here, and then next to that, maybe a Chinese restaurant or a Thai restaurant. There's a lot of variety. Well, I found that in Japan, a lot of time there's a variety of Japanese cuisine, but you'd have to be more into the city to find like foreign foods. As for ingredients and produce in Japan, I find that they have a lot of specific, unique items that they use in their meals, like maybe yuzu or like edamame, that you can't typically find in like U.S. grocery stores. Like if you went to like a Fred Meyer, even if you're in like an Asian section of like the supermarket, you might not find like all the variety that they have or the specific like produce that they have. For bread, I found that Japanese bread was typically white bread, and it was a lot thicker sliced, and it was very fluffy and almost on the sweeter side. The konbini, or the convenience store, I find the Japanese convenience stores have a lot of like variety and like full-on meals, while in U.S. convenience stores you might not be able to make a meal out of the food they offer. Like, and even if you are able to, it's probably not going to have a lot of nutritional value, instead of like what you'd find in a Japanese convenience store, which has a full meal and has health to it. In relation to prevalence, I find that in Japan, vegetarianism isn't as common or as much of a concept to people there. It's like, for instance, my host uncle, he was very surprised when he found out that I was vegetarian. He was like, "Oh, she doesn't eat meat, she doesn't eat fish either." Like, he was very shocked by that. All the stuff I've spoken of is based on my own experience, so this could vary from person to person, region to region, wherever they visit in Japan, and whoever they're with.
Hello, my name is Reagan Langholz. I am a 10th grader from Kentwood High School, and I went to Tamba in 2017. I did my project on impact of traditions on Japanese culture, and unlike the United States, Japan was one of the first ancient civilizations, so a lot of their cultural traditions actually stick with them in their modern culture, and that's what my presentation is about, because I got to talk with several people from different backgrounds in Japan, but have common beliefs with each other. I did my project between different architectural themes and different festivals or cultural things, so like museums and historical sites, festivals, and other activities, and then the correlation between all of them. So on the first day of the exchange, my family took me to SASAYAMA Castle. The castle was on a hill, so it overlooked a lot of Tamba-SHI. And there was a little school underneath, and there were elementary school students playing softball. And right above them was this historical monument. And a lot of the buildings were actually destroyed during World War II from American air raids. And some of the buildings were also taken out during the Meiji Restoration. When we went there, there was a lot of historical significance behind it with the temples, and there were descriptions of what had happened of restoring the site, where there was destruction of a fire in like 2007, but they were still able to repair that building. The main piece, the Grand Hall, was the building that the air raid took out, but the castle is still widely recognized in the area, and people still visit that place today. On the same day, we visited 2 museums, one of the museums being Tamba-SHI Art Museum. Unlike the United States, the Tamba-SHI Art Museum had local artists presenting similar themes of art. And there were souvenirs that you could buy at the art museum based off of these pieces. And every 2 weeks or so, they would change in with a different theme of artist or different type of art. Unlike the United States, where we focus on commonly known artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Vincent van Gogh, Picasso, they focus on artists that do amazing work just in their local community. And that goes along with the close bond that Tamba-SHI has with each and every citizen. And that's how I think that art museum represents tradition in that area. Another museum with a lot of historical significance is the CHITAN Museum. Around the time where Tamba-SHI was uniting to be a city, which Tamba-SHI is still considered a very new city, where it would have several towns united as one. Around that time, there was a relative to the Stegosaurus. They had found this same fossil in other areas of Japan, but in separate ligaments and bones. But in Tamba, they found an entire fossil skeleton, just in Tamba. And that's how they obtained their mascot of the Chitan. Most people who've studied Japanese history probably know the importance of the Himeji Castle and its correlation with the shogunate. But when I went to Himeji Castle with one of my friends, Tav, we had to hike up these flight of stairs. Once we got there, just like in SASAYAMA Castle, there were shrines, there were several artifacts, and you could see an entire landscape of the area. And when we got inside, it was just like going into a very, very nice restaurant or a shrine in Japan where you would have to take off your shoes and you would go through the castle and see different artifacts. There were shogunate helmets, there were landscape maps of the river and how certain flood sites would be seen from Himeji Castle. And with that experience, that was also one of the castles that was barely touched during the Meiji Restoration and in World War II. The only time where it had a little bit of a scare was the 2013 flood in Tamba, which doesn't get talked about a lot, even though about 50-ish people got injured and 30 people died in Tamba. And this castle had been up to the bridge with flood water. And that was the only damage that it had acquired. But the rest of the city was underwater. The Golden Temple, or the KINKAKU-JI, is a prime example of history still standing. Sure, every 10 years it gets updated and painted with a new layer of gold. However, you could barely tell that any of it was corroding or if any of it was damaged just from viewing it, because it was beautiful, shining, and it almost looked like a fairy tale kind of temple. And it's almost a metaphor for Japanese traditions and history, where Japan could deal with so much of like any disaster or anything holding them back from holding on to their values, but there's still a prime, beautiful thing that stands out in their culture and in their history. So while we were in Tamba, it almost seemed as if there was a festival going on every other day, because when we were over there, summertime is where they have a lot of festivals, but when we were going through our first festival, it was very involved with the community. So there were lanterns drawn by children or any new tourists or anyone that would like to volunteer any of their art to present around the festival, and they would put a candle inside of it. And you would have all these different businesses selling food, any games, anything that would bring everyone together in one place at night. And towards the end of the festival, they would blow out the candles in the lanterns, and then the festival would be over. But it was very fascinating how just one cultural day, even if nobody knew what it was about, everyone was together and wanted to do the same things and be involved as everyone else. And there were a couple more festivals I got to go to where there were more religious things where you could go up to the temple and pray and then do some more games and eat some more food, and then it would be more of a widespread festival rather than just being in a small community area and then blowing out lanterns. And then the last festival we went to, it was pretty close to like a very, very significant holiday. So at the end of the night, they set off a lot of fireworks. And there were tons of games, tons of food, almost more food than the last festival. But it was just every other day. And it was almost enlightening to be with a bunch of people that wanted to just be together. And those traditions that they base those festivals off of, it's not necessarily about the holiday itself, but more just having family, friends, neighbors, strangers, acquaintances, tourists, all together in one place. One of the activities that I took away from the experience was the tea ceremony. Traditional tea ceremonies are supposed to last 2-3 hours, and you're with very, very important people and drinking tea and performing the activities in a very, very formal manner. Because of time limitations, we were only there for maybe an hour, hour and a half, but it was put up by the high school's ceremony club, which was hosted by a ceremony master who was over 50 years old, had over 50 years of training with the tea ceremony practices. And he was teaching these kids, maybe 15 to 20 kids, which is about the size of a classroom, how to do the proper setup for a ceremony, how to do the tea, how to rotate the teacup properly, how to have a certain thing to eat before or drinking the tea, and how to walk around in the ceremony, like not stepping on any of the cracks. And when we got to talk with the ceremony master afterwards, he said that he was certified a master after 30 years of training, but in order to become a very, very well-trained master, besides the already 30 years of training that you would have had, you would just have to keep performing and putting up tea ceremonies. And tea ceremonies are usually used to welcome new visitors of an area into their community. And it felt like we were very important, and it made us feel very, very special to have all of these people who have probably been trained for 2 or 3 years, but they're the same age as us, to put on something so formal and so individualized. And that is very significant to Japanese culture today. It's over thousands of years old, and it's still applied to new tourists. The last thing I wanted to talk about was one of the places I wanted to visit, specifically in Tamba, before I left, which was DOKKO Falls. When I arrived, there was a very fun hiking trail. You could see the waterfall as you hiked up, and there was even a temple once you reached the top. However, one of the host mothers told me about the 2013 flood disaster and how it used to be a very, very large waterfall, but because of the flooding that happened in that river, it got separated into 3 waterfalls. But it was still a very beautiful sight. And you couldn't expect something so beautiful to be even more beautiful. Even though it was probably equally beautiful then, it's changed over time, just like history or culture changes over time. In the United States, we have several cultures from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. In Japan, it's mostly just one culture with a few influences, but developing over time. And there's nothing more beautiful than something that's started as something beautiful, but only becomes more beautiful as it changes. And that's why I loved being at DOKKO Falls.
My trip to Japan was amazing. I love the food, I love the people. Some people I now perceive as family, and new friends, just new experiences in life. And I'm grateful for Cat Sister Cities organization for letting me join this opportunity and sending me to Japan for the limited time I had.
I would just like to thank Kent Auburn Tamba Sister City Association for giving me the opportunity to go to Japan and eat a ton of different foods and meet so many different people who I now call friends.
This exchange program and opportunity to visit Tamba-SHI, Japan, has provided experiences and knowledge you couldn't acquire from a textbook or a language class. In order to understand the subtle differences between Japan and the United States and any cultural significances, you would have to go there yourself. And that's why this program is very, very significant to our community.
Thank you very much. ありがとうございました。